Before I begin, let me ask you something. If someone told you to build a tower so tall that even the sky itself becomes nervous, would you dare to try? If you truly want the answer, don't blink, don't skip, stay till the very end of this story. People see Burj Khalifa and smile. But they don't know the secrets buried under it. The nightmares that almost destroyed it. The moments when even the ground refused to support it. The story begins in a silent room, one table, one sketch, and one dream so frightening that even the bravest engineers hesitated to breathe. The sketch showed a tower rising like a blade. A height no human had ever touched. A design no computer wanted to calculate. One architect whispered, "What if the wind snaps it in half?" No one answered. Dubai, at that time, wasn't the Dubai we know today. It was growing, yes. But it wasn't powerful, not wealthy enough to play with giants. People laughed when Dubai announced the plan. Impossible. It will collapse within 5 years. They're trying to overtake New York. Ridiculous. They can't even build a normal skyscraper properly. But Dubai didn't care. Dubai said only one thing. Build something the world has never seen. And the war began. The first disaster hit instantly, the soil. Soft. Weak. Unpredictable. Sand that moved like water. Experts from different countries said the same thing. If you build here, the tower will sink. But the team didn't stop. They drilled deep into the earth. 40 meters. 50 meters. 60 meters. 70 meters. Some days, drilling machines overheated so fast that workers had to throw buckets of cold water on them. Some days, the desert heat was so brutal that people collapsed mid-shift. And then, the nightmare nobody expected. One morning, the drilling platform suddenly dropped a few inches without warning. Workers screamed. Some ran. Some refused to return. Rumors spread that the ground was alive and angry. But after months of fighting the soil, the foundation finally stood firm. The dream had a heartbeat. Then the second nightmare attacked, the heat of Dubai. Concrete dries too fast. Steel expands. Machines crack. Measurements become useless. If concrete dried even 1 minute earlier than planned, the entire tower would tilt years later. So they did the unthinkable, they poured concrete at night. Imagine this scene. Hundreds of workers, flashlights shaking in the dark. Checking temperature every second. Knowing they had only 12 minutes to complete the process. One mistake. One delay. One drop of concrete in the wrong place. And the tower's future would end before it even began. But they succeeded. Then came the third nightmare, the wind. At 300 meters, the wind started pushing the building. At 400 meters, it became aggressive. At 500 meters, it became deadly. Engineers climbed floors that swayed like a ship in a storm. Helmets flew off. Tools slipped from hands. One worker said, "Standing at the top felt like standing on the wing of an airplane." They realized they were fighting not just height, but the sky itself. So they redesigned the building, twisting it so the wind had nothing to attack. This design had never been tested. If the math was wrong, if a single calculation failed, the entire structure could snap like a pencil. Still, they continued. At 600 meters, the world watched. At 700 meters, the world panicked. People said the tower would destroy Dubai's skyline if it collapsed. Some believed its shadow alone would change the temperature of the city. Airlines demanded new flight paths. But deep inside the control room, one voice said quietly, "Fear builds nothing. Courage builds everything." And they kept building. But just when everything seemed under control, disaster struck. The biggest one. The one that almost killed the entire dream. Dubai's financial crash. Money ended. Hope ended. Workers were sent home. Construction stopped. Dubai refused to surrender. Every worker, every engineer, every decision-maker knew that stopping now would destroy not just a building, but a dream that had already defied the world. The tower had grown taller than anyone imagined, yet the journey ahead was far deadlier than anything they had faced so far. The spire, the pinnacle, loomed like a dagger toward the clouds. It was not just heavy, it was a weapon of ambition. The slightest miscalculation, the tiniest gust of wind, could destroy the tower in an instant. And worse, it could take lives. Hundreds of lives depended on this one installation. Workers climbed hundreds of meters, dangling from ropes, the wind battering their bodies, their tools slipping like leaves from their hands. Cranes groaned, joints twisted, steel beams shivered. It felt as if the sky itself was resisting their ambition. Each second stretched into eternity, and the world below could only watch in silent horror. Then, a gust stronger than any recorded in Dubai's history slammed the top of the tower. Workers screamed as the spire swung violently. One wrong move, one slip, and it would vanish into the desert forever. The lead engineer, drenched in sweat, shouted commands, his voice barely audible over the wind. Hold it steady. Don't let it fall. One wrong second and it's over. The tension was unbearable. On the ground, investors held their breath. On top, workers prayed silently, gripping the steel with hands that were shaking with fear and determination. Minutes passed like hours. The spire twisted, then settled, swaying slightly, and slowly aligned with the tip of the tower. And then, a single, terrifying sound. The crane clicked. The spire locked into place. Silence fell over Dubai. The impossible had been done. But even this moment of triumph was only the beginning of the nightmares that awaited. The tower had reached its full height, but every day afterward brought new challenges, invisible enemies that could topple it. The spire had locked into place, but the tower was far from safe. At 828 meters, even the smallest miscalculation could turn history into disaster. Engineers and workers knew that the winds up there were not just strong, they were merciless. They twisted around the tower, howling as if the sky itself wanted to punish them for daring to reach so high. Inside the tower, metal expanded and contracted in ways that textbooks had never predicted. Concrete stretched, steel bent, and the slightest misalignment could turn floors into death traps. Engineers measured, recalculated, and measured again, hour after hour, night after night. Each calculation carried the weight of life itself. Then came the storms, sudden, violent, unpredictable. Clouds rolled over the tower like dark armies. Thunder rattled the steel, lightning flashed dangerously close to the spire. Workers clung to beams, their faces pale with fear. Every bolt had to be checked twice, every connection re-examined. One mistake, even a millimeter out of place, and the world would witness the tallest building crumble. At night, when the city slept, the tower seemed alive. Steel groaned. Glass shivered. The winds whispered secrets of failure and doom. Engineers worked tirelessly, their fingers numb, their bodies trembling, knowing that a single moment of distraction could end the dream. But the psychological strain was even worse. Rumors spread among the workers, the tower would tilt. It would collapse in the first strong wind. Dubai had bet its future on this impossible structure. Some began to question themselves, some began to panic, and a few even tried to quit. Yet the team pushed forward. They devised new techniques to balance the weight, to redirect wind, to compensate for shifting foundations. They tested every beam, every joint, every piece of glass. Engineers slept for only a few hours, driven by a mixture of fear, obsession, and determination. One night, at 700 meters, a sudden wind gust nearly knocked a crane operator off his control platform. His heart stopped as the crane swung dangerously close to the spire. Every worker froze. Time seemed to stop. And then, with a careful correction and a silent prayer, the crane stabilized. That moment became a legend, a near-death experience that reminded everyone that they were not just building a tower, they were wrestling with the forces of nature itself. Even after that, more tests awaited. Heat, humidity, pressure differences, these invisible enemies threatened to warp materials, to twist the alignment, to make the impossible fail. Every new floor added was a fight against physics, a fight against doubt, a fight against human limitations. Despite the spire being in place, the battle was far from over. Every day brought new challenges that tested not only the engineering but the very willpower of everyone involved. Even the desert, silent and vast, seemed to mock their efforts. Shifting sands threatened the foundation, extreme temperatures strained steel, and the unrelenting sun threatened to crack the concrete. Inside the tower, workers faced near impossible tasks. At hundreds of meters above ground, a single misstep could mean falling into a void. Each beam installation, each glass panel, each bolt was a delicate act of survival. Some workers whispered about ghostly groans from the steel, voices of the tower itself warning them of failure. But the real terror came when the winds decided to play their cruelest game. On one terrifying night, a violent gust nearly tore scaffolding from the upper levels. Workers clung desperately, eyes wide, hearts pounding. One bolt slipped. Another worker screamed. For minutes, it seemed as if the tower itself might be torn apart. Engineers below could only watch in horror, praying their calculations held true. Then there were the nights of misalignment, moments when measurements conflicted. The tower's weight shifted unexpectedly. Engineers argued over calculations, some insisting on halting work, others pushing forward. Every decision was life or death, success or failure. The tension was palpable. Even the smallest whisper could set off panic. At 750 meters, the desert storms brought rain for the first time in months. Water seeped into scaffolding, steel became slippery, and the fear of collapse increased tenfold. Yet somehow, the team held together. Their unity became the only thing stronger than the forces trying to defeat them. And still, the tower grew. Each new floor seemed to defy nature. Each level stretched the limits of engineering imagination. Engineers experimented with unprecedented techniques, using twisting designs to redirect wind, special alloys to resist thermal expansion, and concrete mixtures designed to endure the desert's extreme conditions. It was as if the tower itself demanded innovation beyond human understanding. Then came the psychological pressure. Workers were exhausted. Engineers were sleep-deprived. Mistakes were no longer theoretical, they were terrifyingly close. Some broke down in tears, others argued violently, fearing that a single error could collapse the entire structure. But the lead architect remained steadfast, whispering a mantra that fueled the team. Impossible is just the beginning. Fear is our enemy. Courage is our weapon. And with that, they continued. Floor by floor, meter by meter, battling the desert, the wind, the storm, and their own doubts. Every day was a thriller, every night a nightmare, and every step closer to the sky a victory over the impossible. The tower was almost complete, yet the deadliest challenges were still ahead. Every beam, every glass panel, every cable now carried the weight of history. At this height, ordinary mistakes became catastrophic. The wind didn't just blow, it attacked, twisting the tower, shaking scaffolds, slamming tools against steel, threatening to hurl anyone who dared climb its heights into the void below. One day, during the final structural adjustments, a crane cable snapped. A massive steel beam swung wildly, inches from workers clinging to the upper floors. Heartbeats raced, breaths caught, and panic spread like wildfire. But experience, training, and pure instinct saved them. They stabilized the beam, secured the cable, and continued, knowing that any hesitation could mean failure not just for the tower, but for their lives. The desert offered no mercy. Heat waves rose in shimmering walls, bending steel, cracking concrete, and sapping the energy of the exhausted crew. Nights brought freezing temperatures at extreme heights. Tools contracted, metal shrank, and every calculation had to be adjusted for thermal expansion. One wrong adjustment could tilt the tower, and undo everything they had risked their lives for. Then came the final psychological battle. The workers were terrified, exhausted, some even hallucinating from sleep deprivation. Rumors spread about the tower's possible collapse. Investors questioned its stability. Even the city of Dubai seemed anxious, watching every movement as if the skyline itself could betray them. Yet the lead architect stood firm, a calm presence amid chaos. His voice, steady and commanding, reminded them why they had started. The sky is ours to challenge. Every fear is a test. Every failure is a lesson. We finish this, not for fame, not for money, but for the impossible. The last floors rose slowly. Every glass panel carefully aligned, every steel connection meticulously tightened. Engineers worked like surgeons, aware that even a millimeter's misalignment could lead to disaster. Every movement was calculated, double-checked, triple-checked. The tower became a living organism, breathing under the desert sky, reacting to wind, temperature, and human touch. Then came the spire's final adjustments, the ultimate climax. At this height, the clouds often obscured vision, and wind speeds reached unimaginable levels. Workers were tethered, ropes strained under their weight, cranes groaned under the load. One false move and the tower could snap. One miscalculation and decades of work would vanish. Hours passed. Fear hung in the air like a storm cloud. Sweat ran in rivers down faces, hearts raced like wild horses, and the desert waited silently. And then, with a precise, terrifying motion, the spire aligned perfectly, locking into place. A click echoed through the tower, a sound so small yet so powerful that it seemed to silence the world. Silence fell. Then cheers erupted, shaking the ground. The impossible had been conquered. Burj Khalifa now stood at 828 meters, tallest on earth, a testament to courage, obsession, and the human will to defy nature itself. With the spire finally in place, Burj Khalifa had conquered the clouds. But the story of struggle, fear, and triumph didn't end at the tip. Every inch of the tower told a tale, of sleepless nights, extreme heat, violent winds, collapsing machinery, and the invisible weight of doubt that pressed on every soul involved. Engineers looked down from dizzying heights, realizing that the ground was almost invisible, the city spread like a tiny model beneath them. At that moment, they understood that they hadn't just built a structure, they had built a bridge between human ambition and the forces of nature. The psychological battle continued. Even after completion, fears lingered. What if the wind gets stronger than we calculated, some whispered. What if the foundation shifts? Others asked, can humans really control something that touches the clouds? But the architects, workers, and leaders knew the answer: mastery comes from respect, precision, and courage. Inside the tower, elevators carried workers hundreds of meters in seconds. Every bolt, every panel, every light had been tested, retested, and survived conditions that would have destroyed any ordinary building. And yet, it all held. The tower's shadow stretched across Dubai, long and imposing. People on the ground marveled, unaware of the terror, the near-death experiences, and the sleepless nights that had made this possible. Tourists would later take photos, engineers would write papers, and the world would celebrate a monument of human achievement, but very few would know the true story of survival, obsession, and madness behind it. Then came the final lesson. The spire had been installed, but nature wasn't done testing the tower. Winds that could lift cars swirled around the tip, storms raged, and the desert heat tried to warp the steel. Yet the tower didn't bend, it didn't break, it swayed slightly, danced with the wind, and endured. This was not just engineering, it was life itself. The lead architect looked at the tower for the first time without fear. His face, lined with exhaustion and worry, broke into a rare smile. "It's alive," he whispered. "It survived. We survived." And now, the world will know what humans are capable of. Dubai had achieved the impossible. Burj Khalifa was more than a building, it was proof that obsession could defy logic, courage could defy fear, and dreams could defy limits. The desert had tested them, storms had mocked them, the wind had tried to topple them, and yet the tower still touched the clouds, standing tall as a beacon of human ambition. And finally, the secret revealed itself. The Burj Khalifa wasn't just a structure of steel and concrete. It was a living story, a story of impossible odds, of nightmares that became reality, of courage that became legend, and of humanity daring to reach higher than ever before. So, the next time someone tells you that your dreams are too big, too impossible, or too dangerous, remember the Burj Khalifa. Remember the nights of terror, the gusts of wind, the collapsing cranes, the almost fatal miscalculations. And remember the engineers, the workers, and the visionaries who looked the sky in the eye and said, "We will rise." Burj Khalifa stands today, not just as the tallest building on earth, but as the tallest story ever written in human courage, determination, and the relentless pursuit of the impossible.